And I just problem solved and realized what I had forgotten to do, which was record. So classic. So we're going to be talking today about problem solving. Um, so when we think about problems and problem solving, um, it's important to keep in mind that there are a lot of different kinds of problems that we come across. Um, Likely, when you have heard the words problem solving, you might think um, first of maybe solving some sort of riddle or puzzle, such as some of those that are presented throughout the chapter. I'll be showing some to you during this lecture as well. And these are frequently called recreational problems. So really just more like mind teasers. But we also engage in problem solving, obviously, in everyday life outside of things that are more fun. So, for example, making career and school decisions. So, thinking about, well, how to get the best score on a test. What do I want to major in? Do I want to go to grad school after this? Where do I want to work? How do I go about getting promoted? And so these are just, few examples of the many problems that we have to make in everyday life. We also have personal decisions that we have to make too. Whether to get married, who to marry, whether to have children or not, where to live, how to make enough money to possibly live in that place. And then there are also more scientific kinds of problems that come up. So finding a cure for cancer or AIDS, or doing research into understanding, well, how do children learn how to read, or how do children learn how to do math? And so this is another area in which it requires a lot of problem solving skills as well. So all of these different types of problems, they do have some commonalities to them. And this collection of these shared features is what a researcher named Whipplegren called a problem space. So this collection of these commonalities is called a problem space. And the idea here is that all problems have this sort of similar structure to them. So they all have an initial state, so the initial problems that you're facing, and they all have a goal state, right? Your objective, the target, what you're trying to accomplish. And then in addition, there's a series of actions which may or may not be immediately apparent when you first start trying to tackle the problem. And it's these actions that are required to move from the initial state to the goal state. So when we are discussing problems, we need to make a distinction between well-defined and ill-defined or poorly defined problems. And then although both of these are obviously problems, there are these two types of problems differ on a couple of different dimensions. So for more well-defined problems that we might encounter, the criteria for attaining the goal state, meeting the goal, solving the problem, the criteria or what constitutes, having come up with the solution or the answer is really pretty clear. You know that you'll know what the solution is once you arrive to it. So as an example, math problems not all math problems, but math problems can be well-defined problems. You know that the goal is to, solve for X or find the square root of 1,000, or whatever the case might be. But if you encounter more ill-defined problems, this is where problem solving becomes more difficult, because the goal, the outcome that you're looking for isn't as clear. it's a little bit more ambiguous. It's hard to know how and where and when you will have reached the goal. And then another aspect of problems is the necessary information. So not only what kind of information do you need, but how clearly and available is it to you? And so in well-defined problems, these are problems that have the necessary information, and it's stated, it's clear, it's available to you. Whereas with ill-defined problems, the necessary information is either not there at all, you have to go and seek it out, or if it is there, it's not really clear. It's not as straightforward as is the case with well-defined problems. So despite these differences then between well-defined and ill-defined problems, cognitive psychologists make the assumption that the characteristics of problem solving are the same regardless of the type of problem. So whether it's well-defined or ill-defined, there's a shared processing system and a shared set of problem solving steps that are used to approach a problem. And so if we are to, take this assumption and run with it, then it would mean that it's possible for us to identify these problem-solving processes, and to do so using more well-defined problems. So problems that are a lot more straightforward in their nature. And this can be seen in the example of puzzles or riddles. These are often very well-defined problems. And the assumption is also that the same sort of underlying processes of problem solving for solving things like puzzles and riddles is the same for more ill-defined kinds of problems, like, do I go to grad school after I get my bachelor's? Or how will I get promoted at this job? So before we really get into the nitty-gritty of problem solving, we're going to talk briefly about some of the foundational research, the research that happened earlier on in the area of problem solving. And particularly, I want to note that this early research really came out of and was influenced by Gestalt psychology. And so in response to the school of behaviorism and their view of problem solving, which was that, problem solving, being able to find an answer to a problem is really just the result of just trial and error learning. It's really just this more repetitive, step-by-step, like I said, trial and error sort of process of, okay, well, let me try this possible solution. Oh, that didn't work. Well, let me try this possible solution. Oh, that did work. And then trying that same thing over and over again in different situations. So in contrast to that, Gestalt psychologists argued that there needed to be more consideration given to the role of insight, aka our top-down processing abilities. And they propose that there is a greater role that top-down processing plays in human cognition overall. But particularly that top-down processing is really critical in perception and problem solving. So when you solve a problem using insight, so that is top-down processing, it first seems really impossible to solve. You're often like, I'm stumped, like, what the heck? But insight involves this process where an alternative approach, right? Something you had never considered before to solve that problem, totally just sort of bursts into the room of your consciousness. And then you immediately realize, oh, that's what it is. Duh, it's kind of that aha or that light bulb moment when you're trying to solve a problem. And in contrast to this, when you are solving a problem without using insight as sort of your go-to strategy, you are going to be using more of a bottom-up approach. So you're going to be using your memory, your reasoning skills. You're really going to be trying to break down the problem into its individual parts and then analyzing, so to speak, or rationally approaching that problem. And this takes on more of a gradual process rather than this sort of instantaneous, oh, I figured it out. And so as an example of this, I'm going to show you a video of a more famous cognitive psychology puzzle. And I want to see what you do with it, how you might go about solving this. I'm going to go to full screen. There it is. Okay.
Video description.
All right, here is the puzzle.
Hi, this is Prash Talwalkar. Can you use 6 matches to make 4 triangles of equal size and equal shape?
So this is a puzzle. You have 6 matches and you're trying to make 4 triangles that are equal in their size and their shape. Does anybody want to share how they might go about approaching this problem?
Are you allowed to break the matches?
Good question. No, you're not.
Could you build them into a pyramid?
Wow, Taylor, you got there really fast. I thought that maybe this would take a little bit longer, but yes, that's exactly what you could do. And so, and with both Noah and Taylor's response, we see more of this thinking outside of the box sort of a nature, because a lot of people, when they are given this challenge, it takes them a while, if they even end up thinking about it, of the fact that 3-dimensional space can also bring about triangles as well.
Give this problem a try, and when you're ready, keep watching the video for the solution. When you lay the matches, it's very easy to make 1 triangle, and you can probably make a 2nd triangle. But how do you make 4 triangles? The trick is to think in 3 dimensions. If you arrange the matches in the following shape, you create a tetrahedron. This is a shape that has 4 faces that are each equilateral triangles. There are 6 edges in the shape. And that's how you can use 6 matches to make 4 triangles of equal size and equal shape. Did you?
All right. So let me stop sharing and go back to our PowerPoint. All right. So like Taylor was able to come to, there's a way in approaching problems that it might not be so what we might think of as rational. And so there's a cognitive researcher named Metcalf, and she argues that the pattern of metacognition, that is our awareness of our own cognitive processes, which is really important when it comes to problem solving, right? You have to be aware of how you might be going about solving a certain problem, because that awareness will help inform how you might continue to solve that problem. So you have to be aware of what kinds of strategies you're using to solve a certain problem, because if you use that strategy and it doesn't work, you have to realize, oh, okay, that was a strategy I was using. It didn't work. I think I might need to switch to something else. And so this metacognitive pattern is proposed to be different when we are working on an insight problem versus a more non-insight kind of a problem. And so her research suggests that people's feelings of getting to a solution, wow, I cannot speak today, of getting to a solution, this feeling gradually increases in the context of non-insight problems. So you've all had this feeling where you feel like slowly but surely you're going to find a solution. And this is often the feeling that might influence, whether we ask for help, right? If you're trying to solve a problem, maybe you're working on a group project or something like that. You're trying to solve a problem and someone's like, oh, like, do you want any help? You might be like, no, like, I'm really close. I'm close to it. I can almost taste it. Just give me a couple more minutes. And in contrast to this, for insight problems, there isn't this feeling, this gradual feeling of change, of like, oh, I'm getting close to figuring this out. But rather with the use of insight and top-down processing, it's really this sudden change, right? Kind of this flipping of a switch from, I don't know how to solve this, to, oh, I figured it out. And so in her study of this, she gave participants a problem to try to solve, like this one. So see if you are able to figure this one out. So it says, a stranger approached a museum curator and offered him an ancient bronze coin. The coin had an authentic appearance and was marked with the date 544 BC. The curator had happily made acquisitions from suspicious sources before, but this time he promptly called the police and had the stranger arrested. Why? And I'm going to be honest with you, I couldn't figure this one out and I had to look up the answer. So don't be worried if you're feeling stumped right now about this. So continue thinking about how you might solve this. But I'm going to go back to then talking about what participants in the study had to do. So they were given this prompt, and every 10 seconds as they worked on trying to figure it out, and they were given other problems as well. But every 10 seconds as they worked on a problem, they were asked to give a rating on this sort of feeling of warmth scale. So 0 on this scale indicated they were completely cold. They're like, I have no idea. And a 10 meant that they were hot. They were like, I got it, I solved it. So every 10 seconds, Metcalf was able to chronicle these participants' gradual, or maybe not gradual, but gradual progression towards trying to figure out the answer. So does anybody know the answer to this? Or at least you want to take a guess? Yeah, what is it?
I have a guess. I don't think the calendar as we know it was invented then, so there's no reason for it to be dated.
Nice. Sam, you did what I couldn't. That's correct. So in this problem, there are several different things to consider. So you might kind of go down the rabbit hole of, well, okay, what do I know about the making of coins, right? Of ancient coins. Like, was there something there that might tip me off? If you think about timelines, like Sam did, you'll hopefully eventually soon realize exactly what you pointed out, Sam, that people in 544 BC, they didn't know that it was 544 BC, right? They weren't going around and saying, oh, you know, next year in 554 BC, I'm going to, you know, rotate my crops out of my field. This is a label of time that we've used long after the passage of this time. And so again, this study helped us to maybe sort of track that progression of thought. Like I said, you know, depending on how you want to approach solving this problem, you might start trying to think about what you know about ancient coins, or maybe just the coin making process at all. You might kind of feel, okay, I'm a little bit closer to the cold side of the feeling of warmth scale here. But then as you continue to think about, okay, well, what do I know about history and like time? You might start to feel closer and closer. You might get warmer. So this possible difference between insight and non-insight problems suggests a strategy to use when we go about solving a problem. Oh, sorry, Will, I just saw your answer in the chat as well. Yep, again, you hit the nail on the head. You couldn't create a coin and a date before Jesus, you know, BC before Christ, if you hadn't known that Christ was going to exist 544 years after that point in time. So again, here we see that there must be some sort of difference in strategies that are used when it comes to solving insight and non-insight sorts of problems. And so some of the logistics of coming up with strategies and figuring out your approach might go a little something like this. So when you're solving a problem, it could be helpful to first try to determine whether you have encountered similar problems before. So think to yourself, have I encountered something like this before? And if you think about that and you realize that you have, then you might then start to think, oh, okay, I've heard a lot of other riddles or word problems. What are some of the things that I had to think about? What was some of my previous experience, right? Again, using more top-down processing in the past. What did I have to think about? Oh, I had to think about things like facts, right? And that allows you to sort of think outside of the box, so to speak. But if this is the first time that you are encountering a problem, then you might start to think about, well, maybe there's a certain technique that you need to use. And this tends to be the case if the problem turns out to not necessarily take as much insight, but be sort of, again, more of a bottom-up, or what we commonly think of as sort of a rational step-by-step process of breaking down the problem, trying to figure it out. And so to explain what is needed in our minds to conduct this kind of top-down processing, insight and experience-based problem solving, the Gestalt psychologist suggested that our minds construct a kind of internal structure that's used to represent schemata of the world around us. So essentially, there's this structure, kind of maybe almost like a projector, that's showing us a representation of the world in our mind's eye. And so they call this structure a Gestalten. This is German for the word arrangement. And again, like I was saying, it was considered to be an internal organization and representation of objects and concepts, as well as the relationship to one another. So the ways in which they were related and connected. And so it was thought that these interconnecting relationships between or within a person's gestalten and between the concepts within the gestalten, was what would help facilitate the process of insight. And so the idea here is that how insight comes to be, how you have that light bulb that goes off and you have that aha moment, is that these interconnections and relationships between objects and concepts are being rearranged. And so this essentially generates a new perspective on the problem. It gives a different lens with which to look at the relationships between concepts and objects in the world. So there's this classic study in cognitive psychology that kind of grew out of these initial Gestalt ideas about problem solving and insight. And it was conducted in 1926 by a researcher named Dunker. And it's pretty frequently referred to as the candle problem or the Dunker problem. And so in this study, participants were asked to think out loud, so really just kind of verbally process, as they were trying to solve how to affix a candle to a wall so that when it was lit, the candle wax didn't drip onto the floor. And the materials that they were given were a box of thumbtacks, a candle, and a book of matches. So let's pretend that you are the participants in the study too. What are some things that come to mind as you're kind of thinking about how to solve this problem? Like, what are some things that you might sort of verbally process if you had been in this study?
Could we use the box to catch the wax?
Yep. What else could you do then with the box and the other materials you've been given?
In the box to the wall.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So Dunker's study then demonstrates that in order for people to successfully solve this problem, their insight abilities, they have to overcome what's called the functional fixedness of objects. And so functional fixedness is essentially this idea that there's only like one purpose for a particular object, right? So if you are functionally fixed on, let's say, a paperclip, for example, the only purpose that you can see for a paperclip is its generally intended one, right? To hold papers together. But if you start to try to think outside of that, you could probably think of a lot of different uses for a paperclip, right? It can be a bookmark. You can open it up to use as a, like, pushing the reset button on your internet router. You could open it up and like tightly wind it around something to keep it attached. There are all of these actually different purposes that exist once you step outside of the thought of, well, this is a paperclip and this is what it does. And so this was the case in this study. So the participants who were able to successfully solve this problem were able to sort of think outside the box when it came to how they could use the materials given to them. So like you, like Chase and Will pointed out, you had to think about the box of tacks as being more than a box of tacks, right? And so in order to successfully solve this, what you needed to do was empty the tacks out of the box, then use the tacks to, attach the box to the wall. And then what you could do is you could use the matches, you could light the candle a little bit so that you got a little bit of liquid wax, pour that on the box, then use that wax to essentially glue the candle down to the box. And there you go, voila. You could light the candle and there would be no wax that would drip onto the floor. And so here we see an example of this this restructuring of or reorganizing of mental elements in order to try to solve this problem. So taking a different perspective on the relationship between an object and its purpose, really turning that on its head and sort of reorganizing our gestalten. And Dunker continued to investigate the nuances of problem solving, particularly this kind of reorganization of the gestalten that Gestalt psychologists proposed was what really led to this insightful aha moment. And so in 1945, he gave the following problem to participants. So, a doctor wants to destroy a tumor inside a patient's body without damaging the surrounding healthy tissue. There is a device for delivering rays that can destroy the tumor, but the intensity needed for these rays also destroys the surrounding healthy tissue. What should the doctor do? Does anyone have any ideas?
I might have another guess.
Yeah, go for it, Sam.
I would just go for it, you know? Just kill this healthy surrounding tissue along with the tumor.
High risk, high reward kind of approach.
That's
All right.
not the answer, is it?
It's not, but I mean, again, that's one way of trying to think outside of the box, right? You know, if you're being faced with sort of this black and white of, you know, it's either you destroy the tumor or you know, try to preserve tissue. Yeah, maybe there's not a way to choose one over the other. Good point.
Can't you just go at it a different way? Like, he doesn't need to use the device. He can just surgically remove it.
Yeah, that is a good point. And this one, this was a rewriting of Dunker's problem because it was like a 1940s kind of jargon. And so, but it said in the original study that it's an inoperable tumor.
If it's not possible, maybe just tell the person that they're gonna die.
All right, again, Sam coming in with a very practical, pragmatic kind of approaches. Yeah, that could be another sort of solution to this problem, right? Of like, well, like, why even try it? You know, maybe let's focus on trying to maximize their quality of life. You know, just kind of keeping them comfortable and have them enjoy the rest of their days.
How dangerous is this tumor? Do we know that? Because some tumors aren't deadly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a great point. Let's say that this is a really aggressive, malignant brain tumor. Also, this is good. You're exactly demonstrating right now how difficult it can be to solve more ill-defined problems, right? There isn't maybe necessarily all of the needed information that you have here.
If It's going to destroy the surrounding tissue. Could you like put it through the laser through a thin hole and keep it at the same intensity? And so it will hit less of the tumor, but it would destroy the surrounding like tissue, which is the tumor.
You are pretty much on the right track there, Jack. So going back to the study, and I'll eventually reveal the answer. But as you all are probably experiencing, this is a difficult problem to try to solve. And it took the participants in Dunker's study a while to figure it out. I think it was like something like on average, it took them about like half an hour. That is assuming if they even like hung in there with it. Sorry, just checking the chat. Lydia said the doctor should take a nap because it sounds like a very stressful situation. Yeah, again, that is thinking outside of the box, right? Like, well, maybe the doctor doesn't have to solve this. Maybe they can just be like, bye, I'm gonna go lie down now. And yeah, Carly, you're also getting there with your suggestion of turning down the intensity or changing the intensity in some way. And so anyway, Dunker found that as the participants were talking aloud how they might go about solving this, their different problems, their different solutions to the problem, the nature of their thinking really kind of revealed like 3 different general categories. So the first category involved keeping the rays away from the healthy tissue. So in some way trying to, focus the ray or just sort of keep it away from the healthy tissue so that it didn't affect it. The second category focused on protecting the healthy tissue from the rays in some sort of a way. Well, whether that's maybe some sort of a barrier that's put around the tissue, or maybe injecting some kind of substance, right, to try to keep the tissue healthy. And then the last category involved changing the rays in some sort of way. And this last category is what eventually led some participants to the correct solution to this really challenging problem. So sending multiple weaker rays at the tumor from different angles so that the converging effect and intensity of the rays would combine and kill the tumor, but at a weaker intensity and not having them all concentrated through the healthy tissue, it wasn't going to be effective. In fact, this is exactly how radiation therapy for cancer works. This is how they go about shooting radiation into your body without destroying the surrounding tissue. They shoot the radioactive waves in at different angles, and it's able to centralize on the tumor and the cancer cells and destroy them without impacting the healthy tissue. And so Dunker concluded from this study that when people become really fixed on one way for trying to solve a problem, it can be really hard for them to shift out of that and into a different way of thinking. So, for example, if a participant had started trying to solve the problem by focusing on the first category, trying to figure out, well, how do I keep the rays away from the healthy tissue? Or if they first started thinking about, well, how do I protect the healthy tissue? If they started out already thinking in one of those categories, then they had a harder time being able to shift to another category to try to solve the problem, especially as they kind of continued on down the path of that particular category. And so this process of thinking in a categorical kind of way while problem solving is what Gestalt psychologists refer to as using a mental set. But in Dunker's study, for the participants who were able to shift their mental set, they were eventually able to get out of the initial categories that they started in, or really thinking outside of these categorical boxes that they started in, they were able to gain a totally different perspective on a possible solution to the problem, realizing, oh, you know what if I do something to the rays? What if the rays are what need to be altered? And so being fixed in some kind of a way, whether it's functional fixedness, where, well, you just see a box as something that holds Tic Tacs, you just see Tic Tacs, no, thumbtacks. Wow, this is word finding Wednesday, everybody. But whether you see a box that's sort of just a box, or a paperclip as just a paperclip, like all a paperclip can do is just hold pieces of paper together. Or if you are really more fixed in terms of your mental set, you're not able to think about a different category, a different approach. This sort of fixedness, it really constrains and limits our abilities to come up with solutions to a problem. Sorry, I was on the wrong slide, I apologize. So now we're going to watch a video of just sort of demonstrating a foundational study on functional fixedness. It was talked about in your book, but it was done by a researcher named Mayer. And again, it was looking at this functional fixedness and how we can get stuck.
You can take this test right from your living room.
This is a simple game, really. All you have to do is tie 2 ropes together. But the problem is these 2 ropes don't easily reach each other. So that's going to require you to come up with a creative solution. You have the chair, paint can, and a pair of pliers that you can use to solve this problem.
Take a second and consider what you would do to tie this 5-foot rope to this 4-foot rope. Keep trying as these college students also take on the challenge.
You understand what you have to do?
I gotcha.
Tie the ropes together?
Yes.
You can't reach both ropes from the floor, but simply standing on the chair won't help. You're going to have to get creative.
I'm going to tie the chair.
Okay.
Seem impossible? We assure you, it can be done.
Yeah, it's not gonna work.
Do you feel like giving up too? Well, before you do, let's find out what might be standing in your way.
When you're trying to think of the uses for the objects in the room, you have a hard time thinking of a use that you haven't encountered in your lifetime.
You're not born knowing what a paint can is, but over time, you form associations, such as what a paint can looks like and how it works. Object association is an activity that takes place in a region of the temporal lobe.
If we can prime people to think of a can of paint in a completely different way, that can really help us solve the problem instantly.
So, how does this apply to the ropes challenge and the objects provided? First, you have to add weight to one rope to create a pendulum. What can you use for weight? Here's where that creative thinking comes in handy.
You've gotten very close. You're very close.
Swing the paint can pendulum. Then, while holding onto the other rope, stand on the chair and catch the pendulum as it swings in your direction. With the ends of the ropes now in close proximity, you can release the paint can and tie the ropes.
Yay!
Okay.
You got it! Yeah!
Did it!
Good job!
That was not easy.
Have you ever used a paint can as a pendulum before?
No, I have not.
Is it the first time?
Yes, it is. I need to get in the gym. I did that! Yes!
Congratulations on completing the Total Mental Fitness Challenge. The 2 ropes problem required your concentration to slow down and take in the details, and your mental flexibility to stretch and find a creative solution.
All right, so now we're gonna jump back to the PowerPoint. Oh no, we're not, because my sound is still playing. Ah. Okay, all right. We don't need a soundtrack for the lecture. Okay, so yeah, Chase, I was excited when I found that video because I was already like, oh, this is perfect. And then I remembered that you had told me about the Brain Game show, and I was like, amazing. So yeah, I'll definitely have to check out more of those episodes. Okay, so the early insights that we had about human problem solving approaches and abilities, they eventually came to influence the developing field of computers and artificial intelligence, AI, that really took off in the 60s and obviously still continues today. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about how various artificial intelligence models have been developed based on what we know about how we go about problem solving. And we're going to jump back to continuing to talk more in depth about actual human problem solving next week. So the field of AI, it really came out of the fact, one of the ways that it developed was that researchers realized that it's really interesting to try to figure out what's going on inside someone's head as they're problem solving. And one of the techniques that had been developed by researchers is called protocol analysis. This is a research technique that we briefly talked about in regards to consciousness. So if this sounds somewhat familiar, that's probably where you know it from. But researchers Erickson and Simon, they argued that people actually have pretty good access to their complex mental processes, particularly their metacognition. So again, the idea that they're able to track how they're thinking. And so they use protocol analysis to examine how people were going about solving problems like chess or breaking cryptic codes. And so here again, they're thinking out loud, and the experimenter is writing down everything that they say verbatim, word for word, for later analysis. And so using this, the experimenter is able to use this information to try to identify different aspects of the person's knowledge, maybe their mental activity, as well as the approach to problem solving that they're taking. And this has been a really helpful way to try to chart out human problem solving approaches so that they can be then simulated by computers. So this protocol analysis approach is pretty useful, but it has some limitations. So there can be gaps in what's recorded. So for example, somebody might not be fully speaking out loud what they're solving, right? They might forget, oh yeah, that's right, I'm supposed to talk out loud as I'm trying to solve this. Or they might not be able to put words to all of the different steps that they're taking, right? This is the influence of the unconscious. Sometimes we don't know exactly how we came to a particular conclusion or a decision because it wasn't something that we consciously and voluntarily did. It was something that was kind of running in the background, so to speak, of our unconscious. And also sometimes the protocol, what's written down of the person's processing, is ambiguous, or it could be really difficult to interpret, right? If you've ever heard anybody, talking out loud to themselves, or if you talk out loud to yourself, if you think about somebody going back and trying to read that and make sense of it, it could be difficult. And so in addition to this protocol analysis approach, there has been a problem-solving simulation that used computer programs. And this was the earliest approach of this use of computer software to solve problems. Was a pretty big deal in the AI world, and it's called the general problem solver. So this is a computer program that began as really a theory about how humans might go about carrying out various tasks and what their resulting behavioral output was. So, behaviorally, what does it look like to play a chess game or to solve a crossword puzzle? And this general problem solver, it used what's called means-end analysis to solve problems. So in means-end analysis, first, the larger problem was then divided into smaller problems. Or you can think of this as the larger goal was then broken down into smaller sub-goals. And then the difference that existed between the initial starting state that the situation was in, and then the fully, at the end of the line goal state that was involved, as well as the difference between the initial state and the sub goals, was the difference was calculated by the computer. And then the computer was then able to analyze, well, what are some things that can be done to minimize the difference? If there's this huge gap between where you're starting and where you're ending up, what are some things that you can do along the way to make that gap more narrow? And so this, like I said, this was really pivotal in the world of AI because it gave us a way of, like I said, of simulating human behavior and really being able to get a clear view into the sort of mind that was involved with problem solving. So, obviously we're not able to look into people's heads in terms of, seeing their sort of, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, I'm going to take this action. But we could with this computer program. So the general problem solver was, of course, earlier on in the field of AI. So there were some issues. And so one of them was, although the general problem solver was able to solve problems, it was able to figure them out, whereas sometimes these same problems, humans weren't able to figure them out. They were like, I don't know what the answer is. The general problem solver was able to solve the problems that were given to it, but there were some difficulties that human participants had in certain places that the general problem solver didn't have. And so this was interesting, but also it showed us that this computer program wasn't exactly reflective of human cognition, because if it was, then it should have had this difficulty, these breakdowns in solving abilities in similar places of these problems that humans did. And also another sort of limitation that was realized about this approach was that if you fed a well-defined problem into the computer program, totally able to solve these well-defined, really clear, straightforward, gives you all the necessary information. it was able to solve those kinds of problems. But its problem-solving abilities started to break down when these more ill-defined problems, more vague, didn't necessarily give you all the info you needed from the beginning. When those sort of more ambiguous situations were given to the computer, it had a lot more of a difficult time really trying to solve that. And so, again, these two findings and conclusions showed us that, well, we needed to keep going in this area of AI, because if it's not having the same difficulties that people did, and if it was struggling with ill-defined problems, which are typically problems that people generally are able to solve, or at least are able to solve them at a higher frequency than this computer program, then that was evidence that this computer program, it wasn't an exact one-to-one representation of human cognition. And so then further research, of course, moved on from this point to try to continue to see if we can really accurately simulate how human problem solving is accomplished. So that's where we're going to stop for today. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Well, because of the 4-day break, that means I will not see you on Friday for live lecture, and that also means that there won't be a lecture for you to watch on Monday. So in terms of cognitive lectures, you are carefree until next Wednesday. So I will see you all in a week. I hope that you all can enjoy your Easter break in whatever way feels relaxing and helpful and needed. I hope you all stay safe and enjoy your time off.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.